Okay, it's 20 to 4. The inquiry is resumed. Mr. Bird, would you like to start asking your questions? Is there anything you need me to?
Madam, yes, could you get out the design and access statement and the same for Mr. Pryor, which is core document 1231. And the only other document other than the presentation is 2-103, which is the build sequence.
Just give me 1 sec. I've not got to the
Okay.
design and access statement yet. Sorry.
It takes a little while to load. 1231.
Do that. That in CDO1 folder or
it is in the one folder, I believe, madam. Yes, and just check that. Should be the original application document folder.
not getting anything when I search in CDO1.
I have it listed under CD 1231 as well.
Yes, it is in the first original application submission.
Original application
documents.
submission documents.
Yeah.
Why can't I find it then? Is it under his DAS or because when I put in 231?
No, it just says CD1-231 document 02 on the public access site.
Does anybody know what it's?
Mark, I do have a physical copy, if that would assist you. I mean, Mr. Bird's got the document before him. I haven't.
Can you just help where
Yeah,
it is?
of course.
Sorry, this is why I really wanted
Yeah.
a core access with hyperlinks.
Yeah. This one, CD1-231.
Okay, that would do that, but it wasn't coming up.
It's just a little.
Yes, it should be 1231.
Probably.
Yeah.
Right, thank you. I've got the design access.
Thank you, madam. Yeah.
Sorry, I should have just hang on. That should have done as a. Otherwise, I can't get back to the core docs now because it's opened up as a. One sec. Let me open it in a separate browser and go back. Okay, and what was the other document?
It was 2-103. Let's give you a better guide for where that is.
No, I've got it up now. If it's going to load. Sorry, I'm having to hotspot as well because my VPN from the inspectorate will not let me on the council's Wi-Fi. So.
Okay, 2-103 is in the addendum submission pack, which is 5.
That's CD2-103.
103.
Don't like finding it either on here for some reason.
But we can come back to that. Madam.
Okay.
That's towards the end. The questions I've got for Mr. Pryor. Okay, Mr. Pryor, could you first go, please, to page 19, PDF page 19, if you have it in that form of the design and access statement. It's also hard copy, page 19. Which has section 2.3.4 iterating the brief. Got that? We can see on the right hand side the diagram of the process, research, design, option testing. At which stage in that process did the constraints inform the quantum of development, i.e. the 18 sound stages at 43,921 square meters?
Sorry, it's a process of iteration for us. So it's a dialogue between both site and brief. Now there is a need that the film studio has, so that starts to become apparent through the research process. So as we go into option testing, we're probably looking at a couple of models of studio layout and quantum of development at that point, and
Yeah.
how we're going to distribute that on the site. What's the model that we're trying to replicate or improve upon? So I suppose it's in the option testing piece. You're starting to settle
Yeah.
that piece
Well,
out.
it's the relationship between what the appellant says the need is,
Yeah.
and the design process that I
Yeah.
want to probe with you. So where do I find that process analysed, or at least described, in the design and access statement?
Well, the overall process is laid out here. What we were, for instance, it says in here,
Can you
expertise.
just tell me what page that is?
I'm on page 19.
Page 19,
So
thank you.
if I just stick with that diagram, for instance, there's a piece in here, expertise and feedback. So at that point, we're talking to the industry with both our site constraints, our models of development, and we're testing that with the industry.
Yeah.
So we're starting to evolve the proposition at that point.
Yes, but in terms of then the option testing,
Yeah.
what were the options tested in terms of, for example, the number of sound stages tested in the options and the floor space of those sound stages? Where again do I find that in the design and access statement?
Well, I couldn't point it to you in the design and access statement.
Well, it's not in your presentation, is
No.
it?
No, well, it's
And
it's that process that's laid out on that page 19, which talks about iterating the brief.
Well, as I understand it, you've placed a lot of reliance in your presentation, the appellant does, in terms of the critical mass and the importance of critical mass.
Yeah.
You knew when you were designing the scheme it was in the green belt, didn't you?
Yes.
You knew you had to justify each and every square metre of development in the green belt. So it's not unfair, is it, to ask you how you've identified, in terms of the scheme design, the critical mass? So, for example, if we go on to page 20, we have the production clusters, and this is in your presentation at page 13, if you want to look at it there. That's easier. We can see, can't we, in terms of the production clusters which are proposed, they're each capable of supporting 1/10 pole film production.
Yeah.
And each capable of hosting 3 to 4 high-end television.
Yeah.
But they're not the same size, are they? In terms of the number of stage spaces, or indeed the quantum of floor space.
They're slightly different from each other.
Yes.
Yeah.
So as a matter of fact, you can support one high-end film and up to 4 high-end TV productions with less floor space than, for example, you're proposing in cluster 1.
Well, except that not every film turns up with a defined amount of space required. There's flex within that. The differences across the site, the subdivisions of the site, allows you to, I suppose, flex the distribution of those units, number of stages, workshops, offices to any particular production.
Yeah.
So there are mega productions, there are smaller productions, but you start to test what we think would be a quantum of development in respect of how the site is laid out that will answer this question of being able to deliver 2 films at any one time, have another one in production.
Yes, but where do we see that relationship analysed? So where, for example, in terms of your critical mass argument, where do I see evidence that, for example, 14 sound stages as opposed to 18 would deliver materially less flexibility in terms of, as it were, global demand?
Well, I haven't presented that in my
No.
evidence.
Okay, thank you. And in terms of the design and access statement, if we just go on in the design and access statement to want to go to 6.7.2, I'll give you a good reference to that in terms of a page number in a moment. 111, thank you very much. Mine's been very slow to load. Page 111. And 6.7.2, we can see the usual requirements for film productions usually require 7 to 8 sound stages, and the TV productions might need 3 to 4.
Yep.
Yes. Yeah. So, for example, in terms of the need for 1 tentpole and 4 high-end TVs, that could be met by 7 sound stages on each cluster, couldn't it?
Well, I think the word there is usually,
Yeah.
but there are always exceptions, and
Yeah.
and part of, I think, of the competitive positioning of these studio setups is to have that broader face to the industry in terms of the variety of space that they'll need and the quantum of space that they'll need.
Yeah. But where was that, and where is the evidence that that was balanced against the site constraints?
Well, I hope in my explanation I talked about how the site itself informed our layouts, how what we thought as the key characteristics of the site, its landscape structure, its levels, in effect, at one level dictated the ultimate level of development, but also allowed us to pursue this idea of a intense street-based proposition, an environment. So I would see no advantage that we're in distributing this over a wider area. The site, to me, read as a particular place with a particular set of characteristics, and into that we could address this proposition around amount of studio space and supporting workshop space that went with it.
That you, as the master planner, regard the, as it were, the context as not being sensitive to the issue of the overall scale of development and
No,
how
I
it's
think-
disposed.
No, I think context is really important.
Right.
And the context, to me, is described by the edge condition of the site as we see it at the moment.
And then if we can go to page 52 of the design and access statement, which deals with the landscape context visual appraisal.
52.
Yeah. Just beneath 5.3.3.
Yeah.
The third paragraph down talks about the elevated land to the north and south within the AOMB and from Winter Hill and the
Yeah.
views. And then concludes consideration of these views has helped to inform the master plan layout, architectural design and materiality, and the approach to design of the landscape buffer zones. Quantum is not, is it, one of the factors which was informed by the visual appraisal, according to that paragraph?
Well, quantum is part of the overall idea of place. Quantum is not mentioned in that paragraph, but certainly that mapping, that intent about the idea of place, its scale within the landscape, of course, informs how we lay the site.
Let's go on then to page 93, which deals with the design process 6.1.5. Series of diagrams, some of which effectively reproduced in your presentation today. We see under the first that the overlay of the different site conditions, flooding, existing tree and ground conditions provides the overarching strategy.
Yep.
Film studio buildings will be located on the northern plots as they sit outside the floodplain and have a reduced ecological value. The southern plots, which have higher ecological value, will be kept for outdoor filming, culture and education uses and recreation. So again, this is a scheme which has been driven in terms of the disposition of development by the floodplain and the ecological value, as opposed to the national landscape to the north, isn't it?
Well, it's been driven by site characteristics, and I think there's also always a dialogue between the site and its context. And I suppose part of the modelling we went through was if you distributed this in a different way, let's say you we're looking for 18 sound stages. How would you put those on a site in such a way as to both create place, create the right type of environment you're looking for, but also sit that in the context of the landscape? And we very much felt that the concentration of that answered both those points about quality of place, efficiency, but also, as it were, hunkering ourselves up closer to the urban edge of Marlow and fitting ourselves in that valley landscape in the most appropriate way.
Yeah. But the fact is, at this stage of the design process, when you ruled out the southern part of the site, some, I think, ended up effectively with some 16 hectares which were not suitable for development, didn't you?
Well, we put some development in there. We've put our culture and access and educational area.
Yes, but not suitable for soundstage development.
No, in our view, it wasn't, no.
No.
Because the overarching characteristics of the site said to us, keep stuff in the north, keep it as a comprehensive piece of development, and that the southern areas, and particularly in terms of how they sit in the views from Winter Hill, that sort of
then go on, if you could, to 6.2.1.
Yep.
Which has the concept, and you see the site fixes you are referred to in the design and access statement, which included the retention of the drive to Westhorpe House, and then the integration of the proposal within the landscape to mitigate its visual impact, particularly from Winter Hill and the AOMB. How did the integration of the proposal within the landscape affect the quantum of built form in terms of the soundstage space?
Sorry, could you say that again?
Yes. In terms of the fourth bullet point there, the integration of the proposal within the landscape to mitigate its visual impact, particularly from Winter Hill and the AOMB. How did the integration of the proposal within the landscape affect the quantum of the built form in terms of the soundstage space?
Well, the integration of the whole design proposition, I suppose, set itself some rules about conservation of edge condition, where we sat our larger buildings, where we sat our edge condition buildings. We were responding to both that broader landscape context of development sat in the valley and balancing that out with the nearer place context of roads and footpaths. So the soundstage requirements that were evolving out of our brief and our discussion, in our mind, had a natural place within the site. Our design responded to that in terms of materiality, layout, and roof treatments. So we were in this dialogue between the larger landscape setting, the site itself, the need for these building sizes, and the sort of structuring form the site gives us with the Westhorpe Park Drive and the subdivision of the site. So our process, I suppose, is one of that dialogue between the bigger context and the site itself.
Yes, but let's put that in the context. Go to page 97, where the various options, master plan options, are set out between June 2021 and May 2022. I mean, what's, in terms of the quantum of soundstage space across the piece 2021 to 2022, to what extent did it actually vary significantly?
It didn't.
No.
After we'd looked at those operational requirements, after we talked to the industry, we were pretty much settled on a broad capacity and started to refine that. The changes really started to happen, I suppose, around how we handled our workshop space, office space, things like the studio hub and those sort of distribution of and the detailed distribution of those amenity facilities, which is what you see as you go sort of more to the right of those diagrams.
Okay. And just while we have these options, and again, it's related to the visual effects of the scheme. We see in the May 2022 version the northern multi-storey car park.
Yep.
You've said that the taller buildings, including the soundstage space, are set towards the centre of the site. By centre, I assume you mean behind the workshop buildings.
Yeah.
On the frontage. The multi-storey car park, the northern multi-storey car park, if we go to page 209 of the design and access statement, we just put that in context. You can see there has a height of close to 20 metres.
I'll check that. I think that's about right. Yeah.
And what's the width of that elevation?
The length of the elevation.
Yeah.
I'll have to go to the detailed drawing. Hang on. Don't have the length of that building. Continue.
Well, it's a matter of fact, but I mean, we can scale it
yeah.
off a drawing and
Yeah.
give it to the inspector as a measurement. You're happy with that? And in terms of the evolution of that, if we can go back, please, to page 97. It appears in its present guise in terms of the master plan only in May 2022. Would that be fair?
In its final form, yes.
Yes. And whilst you refer to, for example, the soundstage space being darker in terms of the elevations presented to the AOMB, that wouldn't apply, would it, in terms of the northern multi-storey car park?
No, we looked at that sort of variety of materials, the palette, as part of the discussion, I believe, with the design review panel. And of course, you know, one of the considerations was that north-facing elevation. So we were, through that sort of review of materiality and things, that became the metal grille that we settled on.
Yeah, and was any consideration given to its orientation in the design process?
Oh yeah, would have been, yes. Yeah.
Well, you say would have been. When I say
Yes.
was any consideration,
Yeah.
So as far as the design and access statement, are you aware of any evidence consideration was given to it?
The design and access statement captures moments in a design process. There are multiple design iterations that take place during the evolution of the scheme.
And so why was it that it ended up as it does, presenting that length of elevation towards the national landscape?
Well, there was a relationship with, if I remember rightly, if you see just to the left of it, there is a utility building. We incorporated that, as I remember, into the base of that building. We were refining car parking needs. I think at one point we dropped down the height of the building. I think it's currently at about 16.5 meters. Sorry, I've lost the page. So yes, we were looking at different options, different capacities, as we were looking at the scale of the site relative to the number of cars required, the mobility distribution, everything was flexing. And then I think the other thing, of course, about its location is that it sits outside the secure ring so that it's accessible to both visitors and critically that Halo business cluster.
And in terms of its siting, it is towards the higher part of the site, isn't it?
Yes, deliberately we placed the workshop buildings in front of it, so we have that finer grain of buildings to the north, and it sits behind those buildings.
Then just stay with that May 2022 final master plan drawings. It's illustrative of the access way to Westhorpe House and Westhorpe Park. And you stressed the design benefit of the, as it were, breaking up effect provided by the access road there in terms of the scheme. Where would that be perceived from outside the site?
I think it worked at two levels. It was our thoughts about, as you move towards Westhorpe House, that corridor through the site, it gave us a piece of landscape infrastructure. It gave us, as it were, some separation between the units. It lined up from those higher points up on the roundabout. And then as the tree canopies grow over time, you're going to see the tops of those canopies, as it were, between the buildings in views at the northern end from the north and northeast. And then a sense, I suppose, that it connected to the strong landscape structure you had around Westhorpe House and the extension of that green triangle that we made up Westhorpe Park Lane as part of that setting of Westhorpe Park House in the forefront of the views from Windsor Hill.
And so in terms of, for example, the public access points, could be the A404 junction and potential views there, and potential future use of tops of the trees when they have grown up sufficiently to poke above the height of the sound stages.
And the experience of moving along Westhorpe Park Drive itself.
Yeah, okay. Good. Then I think our final point was core document 2-103, which is the build sequence.
Sure, I have that one.
Well, you may be able to answer the questions without it, so we try that. Maybe
Okay.
just as
Yeah, we'll
easy.
get on.
No, that would be unfair, I think, actually, having thought about it. I think you probably do need it. It's 103, madam. Yes, 2-103.
Yeah, you have a copy of the one.
I can't see that in the core docs list. Either I'm being stupid or it's not there, because I have my CD2 only goes to.
It's in CD2. Right.
It's the, yes, file, the 5th of the CD2 files.
If this is the first point of questioning, I'm really struggling with the core docs, I'm going to get really cross. So
Right.
I'm just letting you know,
No, well, that's helpful.
because
Madam.
this is really frustrating. Having to go in and out these folders is particularly annoying. Is there any other method that we can look at,
Well,
or the council can look at? Because this is really frustrating. Just laying a line in the sand.
no,
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Fan. We'll see what we can do. In the entitled indicative build sequence, have you got it?
Yep.
And then you just go to the 5th page, 5 of 17, which sets out the phases of the development, the overall project in sequence. See
Yeah.
that?
Got it, yep.
In terms of the sequence of development, there is no soundstage space in plot 3 until phase 6, is there?
Plot 3 until phase 6. For the reading this. That's right, yeah.
Which enables the developer in due course to, as it were, test, as I understand it, the concept before moving to the stage or sound stage space development in phase 2.
Well, I may be the wrong person to be asking about the build sequence, to be honest.
That's fine.
uh,
I can ask Mr. Davis in due course, who does deal with it.
yeah, we'll find out.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Bird. Okay, it's Nevin. Do you want to move down, or are you okay where you are?
I'm okay, madam, thank you. Can you hear me, Mr. Pryor?
I can, yes.
Good. Before we begin, madam, if you could keep open, and you as well, Mr. Pryor, the design and access statement.
Yep.
CD 1231. And there's also the presentation that you gave just now. I think
Yep.
those are the only documents I intend to go to for now anyway. So if we've both of those open, we should be okay. So the first question I have for you, Mr. Pryor, is about the community building. And you discussed that in your presentation. Could I ask you to go to page 220, please, of the design and access statement, where it deals with the community building? We can see on that design, can't we, that it refers to a flexible space, a shop, and there's a furniture store and then another store beside that. Could you just clarify, Mr. Pryor, then the extent to which this building would be community used, but then also incorporate other uses such as the shop? I'm interested in what that relationship is with the community use and those other uses.
So my memory of this is that this came out of conversations with the community, that additional facilities to enhance the experience of particularly the Westthorpe Park homes, that there were things that could be provided that were maybe take up space within those smaller homes. My understanding of the layout is that that's to be, it is flexible, it's to be programmed in time, that the community does and dictate what they want to see in there. So it's as it says, it's a flexible space. It can do a number of things. So it's both a community facility. It can hold some permanent assets on behalf of that community, but could also act like a sort of village hall for wider groups.
And what do you know in that design, what is anticipated for that shop? Or is there anything in this documentation which gives a clearer view on what that shop would look like and what it would contain?
No, there's nothing in here, no.
And I just wanted to ask you then about the entrance sequence. And I think the good reference for this is page 76 of your design presentation.
Yep.
And this is where you told us about the difference between the security sequencing and the internal access road that would lead to the park home residence. So just from my understanding, first, before I ask you questions about this, Mr. Pryor, that sort of red circle, if I may call it so, in front of the cycle parking, is that where the secure sequencing for the vehicles that will be accessing the film studio will be processed?
I'm sorry, I'm having a bit of trouble hearing, sorry.
No, sorry. Is that better?
Oh, yes, okay, thank you.
Just from my understanding, Mr. Pryor, firstly, there's a kind of, if I may call it, a red blob in front of cycle parking.
Yeah.
Is that what you were referring to when you said there will be a separate area for vehicles to be processed through security into the site?
Yes, there's, Mr. Dix will probably go into this in more detail. The way the studios work is that if you're bringing, for instance, an HGV to the site, or you have a delivery, it's programmed in. There'll be number plate recognition or whatever. It will go to a particular secure gate. They will be expecting that vehicle at a particular time. So the red dots on here are the secure vehicle access points.
And is there any provision on this plan for where there will be a holding area if you have several trucks, for example, that would be coming in at the same time?
You can hold them in the streets to the side, so through those gates. You can hold them in front of the entrance square. But I think it's, again, Mr. Dix can go into this in more detail, but it's that management process that either rejects and sends vehicles back out again, or sends them through the gates where they're supposed to be.
Presumably, Mr. Pryor, when you did these designs, you would have done them with some idea of how many people would have been entering the site.
Yes.
And what the workforce would look like and how many people would be employed on site.
Yeah.
And just to confirm, you finalised the designs for the site around May 22. Is that correct?
Sounds about right, yeah.
And you said to Mr. Bird area, I'm moving on to discuss the car park now with you, that you looked at the scale of the site relative to the numbers required when you were designing the car park and parking arrangements on site. And you've confirmed that you did this with employment figures in mind. Mr. Pryor, we can go to it if
employment figures and
Yeah.
the work around the modal shift.
yes. We can go to this, Mr. Pryor, if it would be helpful, perhaps not strictly necessary, but it's CD 1234 for your reference, and this is the economic case for development written and submitted by Volterra in 22. Now, this document estimates the gross direct
Just give the witness
Yes.
the opportunity to go to that document.
CD 1234. This is the economic development case by Volterra.
Searching it out now.
Usually, the second person.
Mm.
Page number.
Forgive me, Mr. Pryor, I'm actually going to use a different reference, which is simpler on the same point. It's Mr. Fannon's planning rebuttal. I'm just going to get the CD reference for that up now. That's CD 940A.
You have the page number.
And it's paragraph 3.27. And we can see there, Mr. Pryor, the original estimates in the planning application for direct and part-time jobs being 1,780 and 2,415 full-time equivalent jobs, correct?
Yep.
And we can see that this has been increased in Ellie Evans' evidence, and now it's higher at 2,060, 4,160 FTEs. Yes?
Yep.
Where do we see in your evidence where the extent to which you've considered these varying capacities in your designs?
You don't see it in the evidence. There's a range on here. We deal with a range in the capacity on the site. We have the public transport provision, bus provision, but I think in these overall numbers, probably Mr. Dix is the best person to pick those up.
And you said you designed to a range. Just for clarity, the range to which you would have been designing the car park and your planning your parking provisions would have been the original range of 1,780 and 2,415.
Yes, with a built-in flex around that. But yes, those have been our starting point.
Thank you, Mr. Pryor. I have no further questions.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Ms. Nevin. Okay, is there any interested parties who oppose the application want to ask any questions of Mr. Pryor? I've just got a few questions. You said it's going to be world class. How do you know that you're going to achieve that? How will it be world class?
I think the most telling conversations we had were with people in the film industry. We met, our clients arranged a whole series of technical sessions with serious players in the film industry. We reviewed the scheme, we listened to what they were saying. We asked about the work experience, the job experience, what wed you to a place. The UK had so many assets already in terms of it's a great place to live and work, and there's always the tax benefits. But we asked the question, what makes this the best? And that brief was informed by those conversations. I suppose I'd also add that I think there's undoubtedly crossovers with other industries, advanced, innovative, tech-based industries, craft industries, and we had those conversations with those clients, and you get a sort of a fairly similar palette of requirements that come out of that. Yeah, leave it at that.
Thank you. So you talk about these halo businesses, which are permanent, which would ideally be permanent on site.
Yes.
With this nature of you know, the productions
Yeah.
coming on and off. Is that a normal for all studios that it's permanent, or is this a new concept that you're trying to create here?
I think there's a variety of offers across different film studios, but we're making a very deliberate attempt to put those elements in at a very high quality. So this is, if you look at our building design, if you look at the offer, so for instance, if you take that digital studio, that sits in the southern halo cluster. But there isn't another one like that in the country. I don't think there's another one like that in Europe that's available, as it were, on a permanent basis to incumbent firms. So there was a real consideration of what it was to keep those trades there, and what gives you that, as it were, improves the offer of the studio by having those skills permanently on your doorstep. And our intent there was to make those as world class as possible by the offer we put on the table for them.
And then they're outside all the core building blocks. I'm assuming that's because you need that security.
Yes, so they can come and go as they see fit. They've all got easy access into the main studio cluster, but it's the core production areas which are secure. And again, it goes back to this point about IP, protection of IP, the word I couldn't remember earlier. That separation of production units within that secure boundary, particularly with, you know, the stars and actors who are in those productions, those need to be secure places.
Thank you. You mentioned that other studios don't provide these active streetscapes. Why do you think that is, and why did you always do that?
No, I think it's part of the evolution of workplace that we've seen in many areas, where we move beyond the crudely the kind of out of town business park to people want to be close to amenity, they want a better environment to work in. And I think what we're anticipating is where this industry is moving to. So if we design science parks now, if we design workplace, we're looking for more than the office and the desk. We're looking for the amenity, the context, the setting, and everything that goes with it. And that's what characterizes distinctive workplace, world-class workplace. I think another challenge with many of the studios is that they've, of course, evolved over time. They've accreted buildings over time, and we've had the very clear advantage to start from scratch and say, in this place, in this context, what's the best we can make.
Thank you. The Studio Hub building, it's public access, but it's not public access. I'm a bit confused by how it's actually meant to operate. Can you talk me through it?
So it operates on, it's essentially a private building to the film studios. It's where they manage the film studio from. It contains their amenities, restaurants, gyms, creches. We have one, all the things that make this a living place. It has their screening rooms, it has the management offices. We very much see it as a place that people will migrate to during their working day, at the end of the working day. However, so it's accessible, let's imagine, from the north, from the studio space, but the way we set it up is we can secure the building and open it up from the south, from the car parks, from the footpaths, to bring the public in for particular events. And our intent has been around screenings, to meet the studio, to bring school parties in and the like. So it's very much seen as being part of the studio, but the opportunity to face outwards and encourage that sort of interaction with the wider community.
Thank you. And then just one from me, the last one really. The sound stages, there's lots of different designs.
Yeah.
Is that just to allow flexibility, or is it to design interest? What's the reason behind all these different designs?
So different productions will need different types of sound stage. They don't want to, as it were, rent more than they need. There's what you'll often see on the film is different setups in different designs, different spaces. So they need to be able to light and equip them in different ways. So there is a variety of needs. There are studios that have very highly specific offers, and people will travel all over the world from those to see those. The decision we made was actually a flexible building that you can dress and animate and specify to your needs within that range of building envelopes. Gave us the best proposition to the wider industry.
That's it from me. Any questions from you, Mr. White, in a potential minor re-examination after the questions he was asked?
Yeah, can I just ask him one question, re-examination based on the question you asked him about the world-class comment? I just want to ask you for the context, please, Mr. Pryor, of that answer. In the evolution of the design, did you and Wilkinson Eyre have access or not to those that had been involved in the operation and function of film studios elsewhere, or not?
Absolutely, we spent a lot of time with them.
But not only spending time's one thing. Just
no, let me elaborate. So we spent a lot of time and meetings that went on for many hours, getting under the skin of what it is to make a film. What do you need? Where do you see the direction of travel within the industry? Where's the technology going? And as I said earlier, it's moving fast. What do your people want? What needs to be available? And you know, it covered a range of things. So, you know, how do you have a more diverse workforce if you have a broader range of amenity offer? Discuss, you know, so that those conversations became deeply informing, as it were, of the place we tried to create. And this evolution of this scheme, this dense, animated, exciting place to be, is a direct result of those discussions. That's what was asked for.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mum. That's my re-examination.
Thank you. Okay, I did say we'd try and do a preliminary session on conditions of 106. It's 4:30. I don't think we need to start that now. I don't think anyone's pushing to do that, are you, or not? No.
Definitely, madam.
I've made some strange submissions in my life, but to press you to sit at 4:30 to do a condition session is not a submission I'm going to make. But what I was going to say, Mum, for you to think about, I've seen your comments, as I'm sure most of the main parties have, and they're quite detailed. I was going to suggest, and I mentioned this to Mr. Bird, and he will tell you whether he agrees or not, but whether it's worth internally the LPA and the appellants having another go before you opine in public about them, because frankly, to say you and I think a lot of your comments, frankly, can be incorporated by amendment and don't frankly need you to say what you're driving at. I think before we have the condition session, that process might be benefited by doing it internally, then providing a fresh set, having interrogated and hopefully implemented your issues.
Madam, we agree with that. It seems to us sensible to take on board your comments in the next draft before we have as it were, the first run through, if you're agreeable to that.
Yeah, that will be helpful. Ms. Nevin, any comments?
We do have some comments on the draft conditions. I'm happy to deal with this either in the public session or with my learned friends beforehand, whichever is more convenient.
If you can do it outside the inquiry, that will be helpful, just so that we don't waste time in the inquiry and you can thrash it out probably a little bit more than you will do in a public session. That will be helpful. Right, so if we try and put in another session somewhere else in the inquiry where we've got time on conditions and obligations, that will be helpful. So we'll just hear from Mr. Kennett in the morning, then examination in chief, and then we'll pause for the afternoon until come back for the evening session. Okay. Anything to raise before I do adjourn for the day?
But the core documents to see whether that can be rationalised.
Yeah, sorry, I was having a little hissy bit, but it's really frustrating. It's because there's folders in folders and it's not clear. So I went to CD2 and it's not there because there's 4 CD2 folders.
Yeah.
I know you can't do the hyperlinks. It's just so much easier when you've got one PDF and you can just search for it and click on the document, especially when there's so many. So
we'll see whether we can still make it more searchable anyway. We'll fine.
Thank
Have
you.
a look at it.
Much appreciated. Okay. Right, we'll adjourn now. We'll come back at 10 o'clock tomorrow morning and have a nice evening, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you.